Alright, so it's here. One of the biggest VR releases this year is out. And of course, it's not even a new game. As a matter of fact, it's not really even a game at all, per se. Instead, it is the brand new motion control-based Resident Evil 7 and 8 mods. Maybe not super exciting, maybe not super sexy, but let me tell you, I have been waiting for this for God knows how long. Resident Evil 7 was one of my most wanted to play games when I first picked up VR, and I was devastated when I found out that it never got a PC port, in VR anyways. I never understood that. Like, why was it only ever on PlayStation? Why never just port that over to PC? It seems like it would be relatively easy. But, I mean, I was even double dismayed when I found out that the PSVR version didn't even use, actual VR controls. It was just, it just used a controller. And that's like a double sag. A double sag to find that out. And here we are. We have not only Resident Evil 7 in VR on PC, but the definitive Resident Evil 7 VR experience. And my God, is it absolutely everything I hoped for, and so much more. I've covered the Resident Evil 2 and 3 VR mods, conversions, in a couple earlier videos. You can go back and watch those if you want my thoughts on them. I generally think that Resident Evil 2 and 3, they're excellent mods. I won't take that away from them at all. The problem with those mods is that Resident Evil 2 and 3 just aren't designed to be played in VR. Resident Evil 3 benefits from it immensely, but I think Resident Evil 2, with its added focus on inventory management, kind of suffers from being in VR because VR doesn't really like to have to be constantly pulled out to deal with the inventory. Especially when pulling out to view the inventory pulls you back in third person, pulling out that immersion and reducing the overall point of being VR in the first place. The whole thing just kind of makes it a lot less impactful and a lot less interesting, and of course cutscenes aren't meant to be seen from the first person perspective, let alone the VR perspective, so pretty much all the cutscenes are super borked. Not the case here. Well, I mean, sort of the case here. A lot of the cutscenes are still kind of borked, but that's neither here nor there. The point is the control scheme, the perspective, it's all designed for VR from the ground up, at least for Resident Evil 7. I haven't dabbled in Resident Evil 8 thus far. I've only been really trying to get through as much of Resident Evil 7 as I can, and it has just been so much fun. Not only is the gameplay, of course, designed to be played from the first-person perspective, so those quibbles about inventory management, while still there to be fair, are less egregious here, especially since you're not pulled out of the first-person perspective whenever you go into your inventory to interact with the environment. It's a big step up in terms of immersion, and I do feel incredibly immersed in the Resident Evil 7 VR mod. And like I said, the cutscenes are a little janky, mostly in that your body disappears and that you only see your arms in Resident Evil 7, which makes it look a little bit awkward. But aside from that, the angles are a lot more appealing. They're a lot less nausea-inducing, if that's something that you're prone to. Less, not none, mind you, again. But I think that playing Resident Evil 7 in VR really does show me that it's the way the game is intended to be played. So many of the textures, even though this was originally a PS4 game, are basically not quite up to modern VR standards, but are highly detailed enough for you to be able to make them out, and the environments are impressive enough and have enough minutiae to how much is in them that it's clear they were intended to be viewed from the VR perspective, where you can look at them from any angle and any height. They just look and feel so good. And of course, Resident Evil 7 focuses a lot on hand horror. Resident Evil 7 and 8 both are chiefs of hand horror. Ethan's hand gets really messed up in both of these games, and the fact that it focuses a lot on both the eyes and the hand, of course, plays very naturally into the VR perspective. Yet again, it just works so incredibly well, and the gameplay is mostly improved as well. Aiming feels incredibly natural. As I said, this incorporates full motion controls if you want it for VR, which is just spectacular. Aiming feels excellent and smooth. The melee controls feel pretty great, honestly, and oh boy, man, the melee controls. We're gonna get to that when we talk about the DLC, because I am amazed that the Resident Evil 7 mod not only incorporates the base game, but all of the DLC into it as well. Oh, you can play all of the DLC in VR. It is so... God, I'm just so excited about this. It is so fun. It is so good. But anyways, and one of the other things I really, really liked about playing it from this perspective was just how many times that I never even really thought about looking through windows of the house to see other parts of the house and whatnot, but you can absolutely do that in VR much easier, and I think it lends to that perspective. When you're in VR and you see a window, you're more inclined to kind of poke your head out of it and peek and prod, and I think one of the scenes that caught this for me perfectly was in the second house when you're escaping from Marguerite. You can look out the window in one of the shadow puzzle rooms to see her walking down the corridor in another, and I never noticed that from the first person perspective, but from VR it's just so natural to peek around that window and see what's going on in the hallway. It's so good, and the molded are excellent enemies for the VR perspective as well, because, you know, I was going through this initially, I'm like, it's not that spooky, I've played Resident Evil 7 more times than I can count, but then the first time that I actually encountered a molded, I was definitely taken aback for just a second as this 8-foot tall black monstrosity stood in front of me. Like, it's not absolutely horrifying, but just the difference in height, the difference in perspective gives them so much weight in the environment that it absolutely gave me pause, despite the fact that I've seen this enemy hundreds if not thousands of times at this point. It's everything here, quite frankly, just works in VR, and unsurprisingly, because the game was designed for it. I absolutely, positively love it. I mean, and even the details. The chainsaw when you fight Jack, of course. And it's just so good. And I love the other VR control things where you just pull off of your back your healing items. It can be a little bit janky and a little bit odd to get used to at first. So I do recommend, and there are a couple of things I recommend with this, absolutely. Just recommend that you go into a save room and try that a couple times to really get it down, because it can be a little bit odd. And unfortunately, that doesn't work in all the DLC either. At least I couldn't get it to work in all the DLC. So that is maybe a little bit of a small issue that I have with it, but it still feels so good. Just reach over your back, grab the Healy juice, sprinkle it on your hand or your head or whatever it is you feel like. It's so good. And of course, to block, you just reach your arms out. Like, that's just such a natural way to incorporate the block mechanic from the base game into it. It's honestly, like, my God, the amount of work and attention that has gone into this is stellarly impressive. And I honestly can't recommend it enough. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about the DLC, because quite frankly, you have not lived until you have played The End of Zoe in VR. If you don't know what The End of Zoe is, The End of Zoe is this ridiculous, insane, over-the-top camp whatever at the end of Resident Evil 7 that completely wraps up the whole game, where you play as a goddamn gator wrangling backwoods hillbilly who punches his way through zombies. And you, of course, it's motion control, so you get to punch the zombies. Just punch their fucking heads off. It is so damn good. I cannot recommend this enough. And picking up, and of course, throughout the course of this, it escalates naturally. You get combo moves and spears, and then finally, towards the end of the DLC, you get a power fist. And I have not experienced such pure, unadulterated joy as just powering up that power fist and full-on anime posing my way through the rest of the game. Just whatcha! It is unbelievably satisfying. I mean, you punch a goddamn door off its hinges with a power fist in VR. Just let that sink in for a moment. Just let how good that must feel sink in for a moment, because I can tell you, it feels fucking amazing. Just look. If you don't have Resident Evil 7, and you don't have the End of Zoe DLC, what is wrong with you at this point? Just go get them and play the mod. Play the mod. And if you needed any more convincing, right? If you needed any more convincing than power fisting your way through a goddamn door, the rest of the DLC works spectacularly as well. I especially loved the Cards DLC 21 and the Escape Room DLC where you play as Clancy Davis and you escape from Marguerite. Both of those are excellent in VR. The tension of looking at Marguerite walking into the room, because the conceit of the Escape Room one isn't just that it's an escape room, but it's an escape room where Marguerite occasionally checks up on you, so you constantly have to put the state of the room back into the order it was when you found it originally. And the tension of that when you watch her walking and skulking through the room is immaculate in VR. I sit down for both of these so that you get the full experience of just laying down in that bed. It is so good. And sitting down to play 21 as a death game, just literally sitting down and watching that happen, I thought I wouldn't care about this, but I was completely wrong and completely blown away by just how deliriously fun it is. And again, both of these were clearly designed to be effective from the VR perspective. Everything about Resident Evil 7 screams that it needs to be played in VR, but up till now, unless you had a PSVR, you couldn't. You just couldn't. But now you can. Now you can, and it is one of the best VR games I've ever played. It's janky, yeah, it's got some stuff wrong here and there, and the controls can be a little bit awkward at times, a little bit, but mostly they're really smooth. The whole thing is just unbelievably good. Unbelievably good. And yeah, this is the most fun I think I've ever had playing through Resident Evil 7. Yeah, just go get it. Just the link will be below in the description. Just get it. That's it. I'm done. Boon up.